tell me why you came to Ashland.
I didn't have a choice. I was born here.
What community or neighborhood did you first live in?
I lived on Thompson Street until I was 9 months old, and then I moved to Howard Street, which is where I live now. So I don't know, it's not really a community.
Okay. How many people lived in your house when you were younger, and how many people live in your house now?
4 people lived in my house when I was growing up, and 4 people live in my house now.
Are they the same people?
No.
Okay.
You know, when I was growing up, I had a sister and my parents, and now I'm living at home with, live in the house I grew up in, and I'm there with my wife and my 2 kids.
What was Ashland like when you were growing up?
Similar to what it is now in some ways, but also different. It was a very small town, had no fast food restaurants. We had a flashing light, no stoplights. Still had Cross Brothers Grocery though. A few other stores still here. So it was a small town, and which it still is.
What makes Ashland so special?
I think the fact that people are very close to each other, which can be good and bad, but a lot of people know each other and are involved in things in town, and so I think there's a strong sense of community here that I'm not sure people have in other parts of the country and other areas.
Are you still friends, or are you still acquainted with people who you grew up with? Are they still around?
Yes. I see some of my childhood friends, and then there are people actually living around my house watching my kids grow up that also were there when I was growing up. So that's kind of weird, but interesting. So some of the people that I knew growing up are still around here, and I keep up with them.
What do you remember about your grandparents?
Remember my grandfather smoking a cigar and a pipe. He had to do it on the front porch because his wife wouldn't let him do it in the house. Remember watching wrestling with my grandfather. Remember my grandmother making great rolls and pound cakes.
Did you see them often?
Usually about once a year. They lived in Alabama, and we would drive 12 hours to Alabama and go down for, went down for Christmas. They had the obligatory metal Christmas tree on the dining room table.
Tell me what you did with them when you did see them.
We would go to church and go to dinner after church, and usually go see some touristy things in their area. They were a lot older than me and a lot older than my parents, and they were elderly when I was young, and so they couldn't do a whole lot.
So if they lived in Alabama, how did your family get to Ashland?
My mother graduated from Emory University Library School, and Dr. Moreland, who was president of the college at the time, sent her a telegram to ask her to come up here to interview for the head librarian job. And so she packed her bags and moved to Ashland for the interview and got the job. And that was in September of 1942. And so she was a librarian here from 1942 to 1989. And so my parents met here and stayed in Ashland.
Did your parents have any interesting stories about Ashland?
Well, I think how my parents met is kind of neat because my mother was the new librarian and my father was a student here, and he went in to interview her for the Yellow Jacket, and they were married 8 months later. So I thought that was pretty neat.
What was your first job?
My first real job? I cut grass as a kid. My first real job where I got an actual paycheck from a company was being a superintendent of a building, being his assistant during the summer, basically being a gopher.
What company?
It was for a property company in Richmond. I can't even remember the name.
If you don't mind me asking, what were your wages? Like, how much did you get paid?
Not much. I can't. Maybe about $3 an hour.
Who else worked in your family, and did they work in Ashland?
Both my parents worked. My mother worked at the college. My father worked in Richmond. My sister didn't work.
What do you know about the CCC camp and building roads in Ashland?
I know that there are all sorts of roads around Ashland that were built in the 1930s, and they're pretty neat to go down, and we used to drive all down them when we were kids.
How much schooling did you get?
Finished college.
Where did you go to college?
Washington Lee.
What did you like or dislike about school?
School in general or college or?
I guess generally college.
Like being away from home. And like the friendships. Didn't like the classes so much. I mean, they were all right looking back, but
did your parents and grandparents go to school?
Both my parents went to college. I don't know about my grandparents. My father's parents died when he was young, so I never knew them, and I don't know if they went to college or not. And I guess my grandfather probably went to college, but I don't know where he went to college.
What kind of things did you learn in school?
Well, hopefully I learned something in the classes, but I also learned, I think I learned how to read material and comprehend what I was reading. Learned how to write papers, get my points across.
And did that help you in the future?
Oh, definitely.
Did Did having a college in town affect your life at all? Or do you know if it affected your parents' life at all?
Oh, it definitely did. It's it was a very big part of my life, of course,
Because
be-
of your
because of my mother. So, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the library just running around and hanging out and running through the stacks, and we were always involved in things going on at the college, and we had a great time going. I had a great time going to the sporting events, and the men's basketball program was really strong when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And football was always fun to watch, and so we were always over here doing stuff.
Did your family attend church?
Somewhat. We went to Duncan Memorial, and I was, I guess, baptized there, and then I went through, what's it called when you're, 14, 15 years old, and you go through classes?
Oh, I know. Confirmation?
Confirmation, thank you. So went through that. Not a
Okay. What was your church's and minister's role in civic affairs and in the community?
The preacher I remember most from Duncan was, I think his first name's Harold, his last name's Wright, and he was very involved in the community and did a lot, not just for people in his congregation, but for other people. And usually the Methodist Church cycles people around every few years. They send them to a new congregation. He was so, the people of the town and the church thought so much of him that he was here for like 8 years, maybe even longer. But I just remember he was here a long time, which was, and so I don't think he was that great of a preacher as people said, but he was really a great person for the community. So he was very involved in the community, as was his family. And I remember they bought him a car when he left, which I thought was pretty neat.
What are some of your earliest childhood memories?
Well, it was time we broke out the back window of some people visiting the neighbors across the street of their car. Broke out the back window of their car. That was a little bit of a.
Do you remember why?
Oh, we were throwing rocks, and
Oh.
and one of them hit the back window of the car. That was a problem. We got in trouble for that. I remember same neighbor across the street. His father would get a tractor and put a couple of trailers behind it at Christmas time, and there were a lot of kids in our neighborhood, and we would ride the tractor from there up to where the U-Crops shopping center is, and there was just fields, and then we'd go over there and cut down there were cedar trees growing there, and we cut down trees and put them back on the trailer and take them back to our house. That's where we got our Christmas trees. That was fun.
Did you do anything else for fun?
Used to go ice skating on the ponds around here. Played capture the flag in the summer. It seems like there were kids all over the place, and we pretty much go anywhere we wanted. I don't know. I think we had a good time.
What was the greatest joy or sadness of your childhood? If there is one.
I don't know. I can't think of a particularly sad event that occurred, thank goodness. And childhood can cover a long period of time. It was, and I think I had fun as a kid growing up here, so I can't think of anything in particular that.
Did you have a role model when you were a kid?
Probably Duff Green, who was a year or so older than me and could always do everything better than I could, so I always tried to keep up with him.
What were the things you enjoyed as a child?
Riding my bike, playing sports.
How were decisions made in your family?
My parents discussed things, and then we did whatever my mother wanted. No, I think my parents had a pretty good relationship, and they usually talked things out, and they were fairly calm for the most part. So.
What kind of health care was available?
Dr. Vaughn. He was a local doctor here, had an office in the basement of his house, and so whenever there was a problem, we'd go up there and he'd take care of it. I remember going up there and he'd come down from dinner to do something, and I'd cut myself or something, he'd come down and fix it up, and so it was convenient. It was only about 3 blocks from our house, and so he was the healthcare provider that I remember.
Where were children born? Did they have a midwife or a doctor to assist them, or was it just in hospital?
It was in the hospital, and interestingly, to divert a little bit, Dr. Vaughn had all his children on Tuesdays, and everybody in Ashland was born on Tuesday. My sister was born on Tuesday. The people down the street were born on Tuesday. I was born on a Tuesday. So he would go in and induce the women to have their baby on Tuesday. And in fact, when I was born about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I was the 9th baby he delivered that day. And as I came out, he told my parents, well, my mother, I don't think my father was there, he told my mother, well, we just had a baseball team. I was the 9th boy he delivered that day.
Wow, that's really, that's different.
Yeah. As a further aside, my daughter was also born on a Tuesday, not just by happenstance. And so she was born on a Tuesday, which I liked because that kind of fit with Ashland's tradition. Then for my son, they were going to do a C-section so we could pick the date. And so we're sitting in the doctor's office in July, and the doctor says, well, when do you want to have your son? We can schedule it for this or this date. And I looked at my wife and I said, well, let's do it on Tuesday, September 11th. It's 2001. Well, let's do it on September 11th. And because it's Tuesday. So that was fine. We were scheduled the C-section for September 11th. Well, on September the 4th, my wife wasn't feeling well, and she went to the hospital to, she didn't think it was anything. She drove herself there, and I went over after work and met her there, and they said, honey, you're having that baby tonight. And sure enough, she did, but it was a Tuesday, September 4th.
That's so funny.
And then we were happy that it
Was a Tuesday.
that it wasn't 9/11. So anyway,
Who took responsibility for child care and discipline?
my mother was the heavy. Although my father would spank us if that needed doing.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Um, do you treat your own children the same way or differently than your parents treated you?
I think differently. Um, we don't spank our kids much. No, we don't spank our kids. And it's been an interesting experience being a parent, because you definitely get a different perspective on things. But so I think we do it differently, but I think both, I think we've all turned out all right.
Did you have any livestock when you were growing up?
Our family did not, although as a young 13, 14-year-old boy with some other boys in the neighborhood, we ended up raising chickens all over town, and we probably had 50 or 60 chickens in different people's backyards around town. But my family was not into livestock. We had a dog or two. That was about it.
Where did you go to get milk and ice?
It was milk was delivered to our house. There was an ice house here in town, but we didn't get ice there. And I can't. Milk was delivered to our front porch, which was pretty neat. And I remember that the guy never left a bill for the longest time for us or anybody else on the street. And I remember one morning seeing my father in his bathrobe running down the street, chasing the guy down the street in his truck, asking him to give us a bill because he didn't want to get some huge bill. I mean, he didn't give us a bill for 2 years. Anyway, the company eventually went bankrupt. Big surprise. But I remember it was pretty neat having milk and butter and even eggs delivered.
They were all delivered?
Yeah.
Did you have a garden when you were growing up?
We would throw a few seeds in the ground, but nothing very substantial.
Okay, and you said you didn't live in a neighborhood. Did you have neighbors on your street?
Well, we did. I mean, yes, it is a neighborhood. I don't know what it's called.
Oh.
I mean, it's over by Henry Clay School, and yeah, there were neighbors all around us.
Were there any distinctive, interesting neighbors?
They're all kind of interesting in their own way. No, I can't think of any that.
Was there were there gathering places in your neighborhood?
No, no, nothing in particular.
What do you know about the original Henry Clay Inn?
I know it was a hotel that burned down in the late 40s, I guess, maybe early 50s. I know it was a pretty impressive structure, and it was a pretty amazing fire.
Do you know anything about the racetrack on Ashcake Road?
Yeah, I know there was a horse racetrack. Yeah. Yes, I knew there was a racetrack over there. In fact, there's one street over from me called Racecourse Street, which I think is part of that track. And my understanding is this was a kind of a resort, for lack of a better word, and they had racing and maybe a dance hall and such.
Do you know anything about the shirt factory?
just that it's now still called the Shirt Factory, even though shirts haven't been produced there for however long. But no.
Do you know anything about Duke's Market?
Yes, I do. Used to go there all the time, and had great place to buy fresh meat. And sorry to see it turned into a Sheetz.
Is that the Sheetz that's up the?
That's where Duke's was. It was a one-story brick building, had gas, and you could buy on credit, which was nice. And when I first got out of college, I was selling sunglasses that you could fold and then fold again. You could fold it up into a little, just the size of one eyepiece, and then put it in a little pouch, and they were really awful. And Mr. Duke was kind enough to actually buy some from me and put them there to sell to people when they came in. So.
That's cool. Do you know anything about Cross Brothers?
I do. There was an article in today's paper, by the way. Yeah, they're friends of ours, and been going there for years. I enjoy being able to go in there and sign my name to get usually a soda and cookies or something. Also remember whenever I went in there with my parents as a much smaller child, they would always offer me a cookie to eat. Do you want a cookie? Yes. And now they do that to my children, which is nice.
Yeah.
So, really neat place, and glad they're still around. And
Do you know anything about Hughes Drugstore?
Yeah, all sorts of things happened in there. We got our comic books there. We used to buy sulfur there. We would buy sulfur and saltpeter, two chemicals, and then we would grind up pieces of coal, and you mix all that together and it makes gunpowder. So we would do that as young kids, and then use our army men and blow them up. So now I don't think you can buy those things over the counter, as it were, anymore. That was also the first place that we saw a condom. It was very exciting.
Do you know anything about Bloomsbury Bakery?
I do not, unless there was a place called Lightfoot's Bakery that was down near Gandy. And when we went to Gandy, we would oftentimes walk home, and we'd stop at Lightfoot's and buy a cupcake or something, and it was really good. But I don't recognize that name.
Do you know anything about the Ashland Feed Store?
Yep. Just old institution, great place to buy stuff.
Okay, what about the newer businesses in Ashland, like Ashland Coffee and Tea, Suzanne's, and the Iron House Restaurant?
Yeah.
Do you have any personal opinions about that?
Yeah, I think they're all great. My mother used Suzanne's catering service for my sister's wedding. It was one of the early on things that Suzanne did, and of course I don't think that caused her to grow like she has, but she's done great. And nice part of downtown. She's in the old Barnes that's where Barnes Drugstore used to be. Ashland Coffee and Tea is, I think, a really neat place. Great music in there now. That's where Painter's department store used to be. I would go in there and buy my tennis shoes and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, what else is that all about, Painter's department store?
Yeah, I mean, that's it was a pretty neat place to, had everything you needed.
Where did you go to get your hair done or cut?
I can't remember where I got my hair cut. I'm sure I did.
What other businesses were located in Ashland that you remember had any kind of significance?
Duke's Five and Dime was huge. That's where the ice cream place is now. And they sold all sorts of caps and bubble gum and stuff. So great Five and Dime store. There was a bicycle shop. Western Auto was the name of it. And there used to be those all over, well, I guess probably in the South. I don't know. But there was a Western Auto store where Tailored Floors is now, and that's where we got our bikes. I can't think of anything else.
What was the town of Ashland like when you were growing up compared to today? You said earlier it's still small, but are there any differences?
Well, it's a little bit bigger, so it has those issues, and both good and bad. I don't know anything. I don't have any strong thoughts on that.
Did your family or neighbors have any reaction to like Ashland kind of growing?
Well, I think a lot of people are, as with any place you've lived for a long time, and there are a lot of people, as y'all are probably aware, that have lived in Ashland a long time.
Yeah.
So I think people have a tendency to say, "Oh, well, it was always, it was great back then, and now it's awful." But so I think people are sad to see things change, but by the same token, some of the change has been good, and it's nice having things like a Ashland Coffee and Tea or an Iron Horse here that, and a Chinese restaurant. Maybe we don't need 10, but anyway.
How did incorporation of other outlying areas affect Ashland?
I know the town annexed part of Hanover about 10 years ago. I think the biggest thing is that we turned our water system over to Hanover County. Mm-hmm. And as I've learned over the past decade or so, when you control the water, you control your growth and your destiny. And by turning it over to Hanover, the town really lost some of their control. So, but.
How did you travel around Ashland?
Bike. My mother didn't drive until she was 50-some.
Really?
She rode a bike to work every day. Or she took a cab. Mm-hmm. Foster's cab would, in the bad weather, Foster would come by and pick up my mother and me and take me to Ms. Traylor's for preschool, and then he would take her over to the college, and then he would come back at noon to Ms. Traylor's and pick me up and carry me home.
Did your dad drive?
He drove. He would drive into Richmond, but we only had one car, and my mother, like I say, didn't have a driver's license until the 1970s, and then she got her mother's car from Alabama. It was a 1956 Mercury, and my grandmother got too old to drive it, so we got it.
What do you remember about the train services in Ashland?
We never rode on a train
Okay.
from Ashland. I just remember the trains going through Ashland.
And so, did anyone you know work for the railroad?
No, not particularly.
Where was the trolley station located, and where did they travel? Do you know? Okay.
I mean, I know because it wasn't a trolley station when I was growing
Okay.
up, but I know where it was, I know where it is now. They moved it, but
Okay.
it doesn't, it's not,
Wait, where was it?
it was at the, where the post office is,
Mhm.
kind of, and where old St. Anne's Church is, next to that is a brick building, next to that, it was in where that brick building is now, and they moved it from there to the Henry Clay Shopping Center parking lot, and it's now some store in the front.
What was the governing body for the town?
What it is now, the town council.
Who served on the governing body?
I can't really remember who was on there when I was growing up. I know now.
Were your family members involved in politics?
Not very much. And there really wasn't a need to be in the town.
Did you attend any carnivals in the town?
Yeah, there was every year I guess it was a carnival came to town and set up on the ball fields over by Henry Clay, and we always went over there, and they had midway games and the swings and maybe a Ferris wheel and a few other rides.
Did you attend the movie theater?
We did go to the movies, and that was fun. Remember,
Where?
where the theater is now that doesn't show movies, that brick building, and
What were the different entertainment options in your neighborhood?
playing outside was the main one. I don't think well, when I was younger down at Henry Clay Elementary School, there was a big auditorium there, and on Saturday afternoons they would show a movie, and it cost $0.25, and we go up and put $0.25 into I remember the person was holding a cigar box, empty cigar box, and you'd put $0.25 in the cigar, and you go in, and all the kids were there, and you'd watch a movie like Gentle Ben or My Friend Flicka or something. So they showed movies there on Saturday afternoons.
Do you remember any stories that maybe your parents or grandparents told you about the Depression or the influenza epidemic in 1918 or anything like that?
Not particularly. Somewhat about the Depression, I guess, and how difficult it was then, but not. I don't have a particular story.
Do you have any stories about World War II or possibly the Civil Rights Movement?
I know we talked about those things, and my parents were certainly. I mean, my parents were living in town during that time. I remember them talking about the troop trains that would roll through Ashland, full of soldiers. But I don't remember any other vivid story that. Or the civil rights movement. I do remember talking about when Kennedy was shot with my mother, and she was here at the library when she found out. And my parents didn't have a television at that point, so they rented a TV to watch the coverage of that. Of course, I was only 2 months old, so just have heard this told to me. But they rented a television and watched that whole, all of that, and then saw Jack Ruby shoot Oswald and and the service for Kennedy. So anyway, that was a big, made an impact on my parents, I think.
Do you have any other comments about Ashland, such as the Walmart or anything like that?
Yeah, the Walmart incident was interesting. It occurred. We first started hearing rumblings about it in maybe 98 or 99, and my wife and I had just moved back here. I say just. We had been back 4 years, I guess. But that event was really helped cement us, get us involved in the town. It brought together so many people to take on this huge corporation. It was just a really interesting time. It was great to see people motivated and active in the town and doing things. We did things I never thought we would do. Standing out on the street corner, holding up signs and wait, over this silly big box store, and packing meetings. I thought it was just a very neat time, and people were really trying to make a difference. And as Mary Leffler, who owns the Coffee and Tea, said, it was we're out there holding bake sales trying to take on the largest company in the world, and it was certainly an uphill fight. I remember at one point Walmart ran an ad in the local newspaper listing these different questions and then answering them. And one of the pieces of information they used was a University of Massachusetts study that said that they don't hurt local businesses. Well, the internet's a neat thing, so I went on the internet and found the study, and I read the study, and it didn't say that. It said almost the direct opposite. So I contacted the professor who did the study, and I talked to her on the phone, and I said, Walmart just ran this ad. She said, that says this. She said, "Are you kidding me? Can you send me that ad? I want to show it to my dean." And so I did, and she did, and she wrote a letter back that we read in public at the town council meeting, stating that, basically Walmart's just lying. They just made this up. They just took this and turned it 180 degrees. At the same time, there was a guy, I don't know if y'all know this, there was a guy doing a documentary on the Walmart battle, and he had searched all over the country, and anyway ended up in Ashland and followed us for about 1.5 years or 2 years as we went through this whole process of battling Walmart. And he found out that I had contacted the professor and ended up going to Massachusetts and filming her for the film, because he thought it was interesting enough that Walmart had said this, and no, it wasn't. So, that was kind of neat. It also, that whole battle motivated me to run for office, which was for town council, which was one of the greatest things I've done. It was really, I'd recommend anybody to run for public office, because it's just a really neat experience. Luckily, I lost. Out of 6 people running for 3 spots, I came in 6th. And looking back, I'm really glad I didn't win. So I think I had the best of both worlds. I was able to run, but then not have to serve. But we put people on there that I think were interested in doing things differently than the people that voted Walmart in. And in fact, within a year or so of Walmart being voted in, anybody associated with that had been voted out of office or fired.
Really?
Oh yeah. And the majority of people in Ashland, I think, were not interested in Walmart being here. Some of them were kind of ambivalent. Some of them may have wanted it, but most people didn't, felt like it wasn't needed. Now, having said that and having fought against it, it's come, and you know, the world hasn't ended, and so I think it'll, you know, it shows that Ashland maybe is a little more resilient than other places. Not one business has closed because of Walmart being here. So it hasn't had, I thought it would surely put some places under, and it hasn't. So I'm thankful for that, because I'm not and I've never been to Walmart.
You never will.
And no, and wouldn't never will. And it's been interesting that people that fought so hard and were so adamant now go there. And it's like, why do you do that? I don't say that to them. That's their own choice. But it just really.
Do you shop at any large stores? Like, do you shop at like Target or anything like that?
I do, and I don't have a problem with big boxes. I didn't feel like it was what was appropriate or needed in Ashland. But that's so.
Do you have any other stories you'd like to share about Ashland or growing up here?
None that leap to mind, I think. But
I guess it's recording what you want to say.
Okay, this is kind of unrelated, but as far as the stock market goes, you say you're a stockbroker.
right, financial planner and stockbroker.
Does that mean that you do portfolios for people here in Ashland?
Well, not just in Ashland, but my office is actually in Richmond, but I do have a lot of Ashland clients. But yeah, I work with people to help them plan for retirement or save for their kids' college education so they can go to Randolph-Macon or wherever.
How would you say the stock market is right now for you?
I think it's pretty good. I've been doing it since I got out of W&L, since '83. And it's been, if you read the headlines in the paper, you think the world's coming to an end right now. But the economy's in great shape, and companies overall are doing real well. So it's actually a pretty good time to be, I think, investing in the market in general, and in particular stocks in particular.
What stocks do you recommend?
Are you recording this? I used to be more of a gunslinger. Now I'm pretty conservative. You know, utilities like Dominion Resources are really good. Although some people have a problem with the stock Altria, which just moved to Richmond. It used to be called Philip Morris. Make cigarettes. When you make something for a nickel and sell it for $1, it's a pretty good business. So they're making a ton of money, and good, solid company. Trying to think if I have any fun, interesting stock.
Did you work with Google stock? That's one I use sometimes.
Yeah, I have. I bought some of that. I didn't buy it early enough, but did buy some recently when it dropped down into the 400s before it jumped back up. And I think it's still, even at this price, it's probably still a pretty good value longer term. And it's expensive, but it's I think they have they'll continue to make a ton of money.
Do you think it's just because they're a search engine?
It's because they're the dominant search engine. I mean, they so much larger than Yahoo. It's where, it's a word. You Google. So they're dominate that sector, and they're getting the revenue for people clicking on the ads that at a much better pace than Yahoo is able to. So people are willing to pay to have their ads on the Google site, and that they know they need to be on Google, and so they're willing to pay for it, and that's where they're making their money. And they seem to be pretty innovative people. They come up with some neat things to drive people to their site.
So you said that the stock market, you think it's a good time to invest right now?
Mhm.
Because I've heard different, things because of how I can't remember what it's called. It's like when the banks were making bad deals with people, that affected the stock. What would you say to that?
Well, that's why, in general, it's a pretty good time to be in the market. There's certainly parts of it that are not, that I wouldn't invest in, like financial stocks. And, I mean, banks just got greedy and loaned money to people that they shouldn't have, and just did not do a very good job of managing their business. So they're getting their head handed to them and losing a lot of money. And of course, we can debate whether or not the government's helping them out and whether or not they should, but they are. But it's still, I think, very risky. But that's not everything. So even though they're struggling, it doesn't mean that other companies aren't doing very well. Like Verizon today just had great earnings. Google had really good earnings. So just because Wachovia made a really bad loan to somebody doesn't mean that people aren't signing up for cell phone service from Verizon or from AT&T or going out and buying an iPod or even shopping at Nordstrom's. I mean, people are still doing a lot of things, and it's showing up in the companies they're making money.
So, when a country's at war, sometimes people buy metal stock. Is that a good idea?
It could be. There are, I don't think as a rule of thumb, it's like, okay, we're going to war, buy metal stock. I think there are too many forces pushing on a particular investment. It is, and it gets so complicated with currency exchanges and interest rates, and then geopolitical force. It gets way over my head to try to figure out whether or not copper is going to go up or down in value. So I've kind of shied away from trying to figure out what metals are going to do or what a particular commodity is going to do. Try to focus on a company and whether or not it's making a good product, that it has a dominant position in the product that it makes, that it has good management, that it has a strong balance sheet. And if you find something like that, and also that might have a barrier to entry to others. I mean, Google's a perfect example. They make a ton of money, they have no debt, they have great management, and they have a good product that people are willing to pay for. That's pretty good. Doesn't mean it's going to go up, but it certainly gives you a good head start. FedEx is another prime example. Great company, low debt, good management. There are not many companies that do that business, and you can't get into it overnight, so to speak. You can't just say, well, I'm going to create a overnight delivery company. Well, it takes a lot to get into that. So.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Well, you're very welcome.